Okay guys, it's story time. As you may tell by the completely new and different surroundings behind me, we have recently moved, and in fact it was a very, very big move. And thus, there's been a lot going on in my life, and my hair is a complete disaster. I know I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, but yeah, it's really a disaster. And quite frankly, a couple days ago, let me tell you a story. I was sitting down with my laptop on our deck of our new house with our kids around me, trying to think of my next video idea, and I just could not. The kids were sort of misbehaving and being loud, and on top of that, my brain was just completely stuck. I felt like all of my creative energy had just been sapped out of me, and I could not think of a video idea to save my life. And on top of that, I was feeling really upset about my hair and feeling like I'm not even in a place to be giving hair advice because my own hair is just such a mess at the moment. Anyway, I sat down with my husband that day and I was like, I just don't know what to make a video about. I can't do this. I can't think of a video. And he said, well, what advice would you give to someone if their hair was in the same situation as yours is? And at first I was like, well, I have no idea. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, what advice would I give to people whose hair is super tangled and locking up like mine is currently? And so that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to be taking my own advice and showing you how I'm going to deal with my hair and get all the tangles out. And along the way, I'm going to be talking to you about detangling, the different detangling methods, and sort of the hang-ups that people might have about my particular detangling method, and sort of explaining like myths behind that, I guess. And I'd also like to talk about emotions and life changes and how they can affect our hair, because I'm currently in that right now. So let's jump into it. Okay, so first let's talk a little bit about emotions and life changes, or life disruptions, let's call them, and how they can actually directly or semi-directly affect and disrupt our hair health, maybe cause hair loss, maybe cause breakage, maybe cause tangles. Let's talk about that now. Okay, the first thing I'd sort of like to touch on is our common cultural / scientific belief nowadays that hair is dead. We hear this a lot. Hair strands are dead. As soon as they exit your scalp, they are dead and the cells are dead. Meaning, of course, that there's nothing you can do to heal or fix your hair strands once they're growing out of your head. You just have to be careful with them and not damage them. And I get where that's coming from. Usually the people who are saying this are people with good intentions, and they want to remind us that we need to take good care of our hair because it's not just going to self-heal in the same way that skin does. And I totally get what they mean, but sometimes I feel like just the use of words maybe is a bit misleading, like to say that hair is dead. Just because hair strands don't behave in the same way that our skin does, in the sense that when we get a cut on our skin, it heals itself relatively quickly, whereas if we have a split end on our hair, I think it's pretty unlikely that that's going to heal itself, although I have heard people claim that they have healed split ends. I don't really know what I think about that at this point, but I just think it's a bit misleading, because I hold a belief about hair that our hair is an extension of us, and it is a reflection of our state of health, in the sense that if we're going through a rough time health-wise or stress-wise, this can very quickly begin to manifest in our hair. And partly this may manifest simply because we're not taking good care of our hair in the midst of life changes or life stress, but I do believe there's actually a direct connection between how our hair is behaving or looking or whatever, and what's going on in our life and our emotions. And then vice versa, when we start being healthier or maybe reducing our stress levels, or we're just at a better place in life, our hair can soon reflect that as well. But actually, what we're talking about now leads perfectly into mentioning the sponsor of this video, which is Ritual. Ritual is a company who makes very high quality vitamins and supplements. The supplement I'm going to be talking to you about today is their postnatal multivitamin supplement. If you know anything about me, you'll know that I am notoriously picky about what supplements I take, but what I absolutely love about Ritual is that they are very transparent about where they source each and every one of the nutrients or ingredients in their supplements. And In every case, they are sourced from like the highest quality, most food-based form of said nutrient. But their essential postnatal multivitamin actually contains 15 nutrients. So they actually up the amount of nutrients because in most cases, postpartum women, especially if you're breastfeeding, actually need more nutrients than prenatally. So your daily dose of this is 2 very easy to swallow capsules. They have a delicious minty sort of flavor, which is awesome. So right now, Ritual is offering you, my viewers, 30% off your first month supply by either scanning the QR code on the screen right now or going to the link which will be on the screen and using the code KSEWING30. Thanks, Ritual, for sponsoring this video. The place I'm at right now is I really just need to give myself grace and I need to acknowledge the way I'm feeling, because it's really funny actually, that day that I was talking to you about in the beginning of the video, which was really just a couple of days ago, when I was sitting down just going crazy trying to think of video ideas, my dad happened to call. My dad actually has a YouTube channel himself. He's had a YouTube channel since I was a kid, so he has a lot of experience. And I guess you could just tell from my voice that I was not in the best mental or emotional state at that moment. And he asked what was wrong, and I said, well, I'm trying to think of a video idea and I just cannot. I don't know what to make a video about. And on top of that all, I have all these people who are interested in hearing hair care advice, and I feel like I'm not in a place to give it because my hair is so messy. And anyway, after having this conversation with my dad and just openly, it felt like for the first time, just stating how bad my hair felt and like admitting it to myself and to someone else, call it magic or just call it coincidence or placebo effect, but my hair started to improve like later that day and the next day. It started feeling better. And I don't know, but I really have come to believe that our emotions and our hair can be quite intertwined with each other. And I just think that's so fascinating. I guess I should back up and talk about what's been going on with my hair lately. My hair has just been super tangled lately, super tangled. And this is going to lead perfectly into our discussion of detangling methods in a moment, but it's just been super tangled and it's been locking up lately. Like literally, like the curls are sort of turning into locks, dreadlocks in a way. Not that extreme, but they're on that road. And the detangling method I usually use just feels like it has not been cutting it. And so I'm actually gonna be demonstrating to you in this video in a few minutes, attempting to fix my hair. Okay guys, so with all that being said, let's jump into the section of the video where we will talk about detangling methods. And I am actually going to be detangling my own hair as we talk about this. So first step, I'm gonna be taking out my earrings and taking out my hair bun. Okay, so the thing about detangling is that the way that we think about detangling our hair has changed drastically in the modern day due to the invention of things or technologies like showers and like detangling products such as detangling sprays or conditioners that you saturate your hair with before detangling while your hair is wet. And the reason this has changed the way that we detangle our hair dramatically is because if these things didn't exist, like for example, when showers did not exist or indoor plumbing and indoor running water did not exist, the fact of the matter is that women or men, whoever, would have been detangling their hair while it was dry a lot more often than they would have been doing it while it was wet. Now, I'm not saying that people would never run a comb through their hair right after washing it, but the fact of the matter is that people simply wash their hair a lot less frequently than we do today. Once every 2 weeks was often considered to be frequent hair washing in historical hair care manuals that I've read. And that simply means that most of the time when people were brushing through their hair every day or whatever, it would have been dry. So like 90% of the time it probably would have been dry while they were detangling, and then like maybe 10% of the time it would have been wet. Why is this important? Well, for my investigations purposes, this was very important for me because I would look at old photos of historical women, say from the Victorian period, and they had ridiculously long hair. Often, not everybody, of course, But it seemed that the average hair length for women was much longer than the average hair length today. Now, of course, partly this was due to the fact that they had different styles and aesthetics, and they preferred the aesthetic of longer hair compared to how we do today. But I'm still convinced that they were actually just better, quote unquote, at growing long hair, either due to their hair care practices or maybe their diets were better than we are today. And so the fact of the matter is that if they were detangling their hair while it was dry, compared to most people today, I would say tend to detangle while their hair is wet. It stands to reason that this could be an important factor in how long these historical women were able to grow their hair, compared to the fact that many people today who want to grow long hair still struggle to do so, and their hair never exceeds a certain length, or at least it appears not to, because it's always breaking. So let's talk about that. What does breakage have in common with detangling? Okay, so I'm just going to section off my hair into 2 sections right now. Okay, so the reason why it's important to think about breakage when we talk about detangling is because obviously detangling is one of the most rough things we will ever do to our hair. Obviously, in order to get out tangles, it's pretty rough. And so the way that we choose to detangle our hair can either maximize the amount of breakage or minimize it. And so because I went through most of my life without being able to grow my hair past a certain length, even though I wanted to, and even though I was trying things to make my hair grow long, made me think that maybe I needed to change my detangling method, because I realized having long hair is not so much about how fast it grows out of your scalp. It's actually more about how long you're able to retain the hair length that's already grown out of your scalp. In other words, how you can prevent breakage. And the thing about wet detangling, which again is much more common today due to the invention of showers, indoor plumbing, spray detanglers, conditioners, etc. The thing about that is that your hair is 30% weaker when it's wet, because your hair is made up of 3 different kinds of chemical bonds, and one of those types of bonds are called salt bonds. And salt bonds actually dissolve when the hair is wet, and then they come back together again when the hair strands are dry, which means that your hair is about 30% weaker when it's wet, which means that when you're detangling your hair and it's wet, let's say you're running a comb through it, even if there's conditioner in it, even if you're using a detangling product, you're much more likely to be breaking your hair strands. But the paradox is that you're actually less likely to notice that breakage happening, because the hair strands are so much softer and mushier when they're wet, that when they break, they're not likely to produce like an audible or a visceral snapping sensation or sound like they would when your hair is dry. Which leads to me sort of talking about one of the myths of dry detangling. In my experience, this is more of a myth, that dry detangling causes massive amounts more breakage than wet detangling. Now, I am going to give a caveat that there can certainly be truth to this, because it all depends on the way that you're dry detangling versus the way that you're wet detangling. But generally, if we're comparing apples to apples, like let's say I want to finger detangle my hair while it's dry, keeping in mind that I don't use a lot of gel-like products in my hair that make it crispy. That would indeed make it harder to dry detangle. But comparing apples to apples, like my hair does not have any styling products in it right now. So if I'm detangling my hair while it's dry with my fingers versus detangling my hair while it's wet with my fingers, it might feel easier on the surface to detangle it while it's wet, simply because it's more slippery, it's more malleable. But the thing is that the hair strands are actually breaking more while it's wet. It's just that you're not feeling it because they're softer and more mushy. And in my experience, this definitely turned out to be true, because for many years I followed the curly girl method. And one of the main tenets of the curly girl method is to wet detangle your hair while you're in the shower with conditioner in it, using a wide tooth comb. And my hair never grew past a certain length. And by the time it got to like the longest lengths it ever got, which was maybe rib cage length, the ends were very uneven. I had a lot of split ends because I was experiencing so much breakage. Now compare that to now, while my hair is dry and I'm detangling my hair while it's dry all the time with my fingers only. my hair has gotten very long. Like it's like hip length, past hip length. It was actually at tailbone length, but I recently trimmed my ends a bit, so it's more like hip length now. And the ends are very much more even than they ever were before. So that's really cool. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add some oil to my hair. I use oil when I detangle my hair because this is one of the aids to dry detangling hair, especially curly hair. Now, I'm using coconut oil today because I'm planning on washing my hair again in the next day or two. Now, if you're not planning on washing your hair soon, or if you have straight fine hair, I would not recommend using really anything other than jojoba oil. The reason I'm using something heavier is because my hair needs it. It's dry, it's curly, and I'm going to be washing it soon. Coconut oil is a very heavy oil, but what I like about it is that it actually can penetrate into the hair strand. So it can actually moisturize your hair in a way that other oils can't. I'm just gently detangling my hair. You'll notice that when I finger detangle, one of the biggest differences is that I'm starting at the top and I'm working my way down, as opposed to if I were using a comb or a brush, you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. I can't fully explain to you why this is, other than the fact that if I were to try to start detangling at the bottom with my fingers, all that I would do is I would actually be pushing the knots up higher. Whereas what I'm trying to do when I'm finger detangling is to work the knots from the top down and out. And also, because I have curly hair, whenever I shed hair strands, which we all do every day to some degree, the hair strands are less likely to come out on their own because my hair is so curly and thick, it just kind of like stays in there. And of course, if you have a bunch of shed hair that's just staying in there, it's more likely to cause tangles. So I'm also working those out as I go. So yeah, I think I covered the main sort of hang up that people have that I hear about dry detangling is, oh, it causes so much breakage. So point number one is that you might think it's causing more breakage, but it's actually just because you're feeling the breakage more than you would if it was wet. Point number two, though, is that sometimes people hear dry detangling and they assume that I'm talking about just running a brush through your dry hair. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about using your fingers and working in small sections at a time, because your fingers can feel. So your fingers can negotiate knots without needing to cause breakage in a way that a brush and comb never can, because they're an inanimate object. They can't feel. They're just kind of like pushing through your hair, and you're basically just distancing yourself from the breakage that you're causing because you're no longer feeling it. There is a time and a place for brushes and combs, especially if your hair type is straighter or finer than mine. But for my hair, the only way that dry detangling can work for me is if I'm using my fingers. And also usually I use an oil in conjunction with that. Now, another reason why dry detangling might not work for some people, especially people with curly hair, is if you use a lot of styling products in your hair that form like a wet cast of your curl pattern, which admittedly can make you have really nice looking curls, but then it is much harder to dry detangle your hair, and it's more likely that you might want to get it wet first. Even if you're using a product that softens over time, like if you scrunch it and it becomes soft, I still find that it's harder to detangle my hair just when the curls are like super defined and separated after using a styling product than if I have not used the styling product. So needless to say, at this point, I'm just not using styling products because number one, I'm wearing my hair up most of the time, but number two, I've been struggling with my hair lately. It's very tangly, so I just don't want to add to that by like locking those tangles in place with a styling product, if you know what I mean. Okay, so now in the spirit of a honest and open discussion, of course we need to talk about the downsides or the limitations of dry finger detangling, because that is definitely a thing, especially for hair like mine. I mean, there is a reason why the Curly Girl method does recommend wet detangling your hair with a comb and conditioner, because it is very good at getting defined curls and getting like a fresh, defined curl pattern every time you wash your hair and not having residual knots left over from the previous week or however long it was. And that is one of the limitations of dry finger detangling, especially for curly hair types, is that, like, for example, for me, my hair has been, for whatever combination of reasons, being more tangled lately. And also, when you add to that I have been probably spending less time on it than normal because of the move and being busy, it means that the knots are sort of like staying put to a certain degree, and there's kind of like only so much I can do with my hair before I need to wash it again. And so there comes a point where I'm like, okay, that's enough. That's as much detangling as I can do now when it's in a dry state. And then I go into the wash routine and I wash my hair, and then, you know, it dries, and I don't detangle my hair while it's wet. Like, I just let it air dry at that point. Like, however it is before the shower, that's how it's going to be after the shower. And the process of washing my hair does usually revive it and make it look a lot better. But if there are like significant knots left behind before I go ahead and wash my hair, those aren't going to leave magically. Like, they stay there. And I guess that's part of what I've been dealing with lately, is that for whatever reason, I've been dealing with a lot more knots. And there's only so much that I can do about that when it's dry. And so they're kind of just staying put, and then the tangles are like building on each other every time I wash my hair. Like this piece, like look at that. You see that? I mean, I know like back up here my hair might look pretty good, but yeah, like when you look close up, look at that tangle. This is the result of a curl that had a tangle in it, and then it was washed, it got wet again, and that tangle was still there. So that is why, like, that's one of the strengths of wet detangling, I'm not gonna lie. So like, for example, if you don't have a goal of growing super long hair and you have curly hair, wet detangling might be for you. Because the one thing that stops me from wet detangling my hair when it's feeling this bad is the fact that I know if I started wet detangling my hair, I would lose all the length that I've gained over the past several years. It would gradually break and break and break and get shorter. And I know that because it's happened to me before. So that's what stops me from wet detangling. But as I said, if you don't have a goal of growing long hair and you just want, you know, crisp looking curls, and you know, that's, you can wet detangle your hair. Like, it's all about your goals, really. So at this point, I'm going to introduce a new nuance to this conversation. I've just been spending the last however many minutes talking to you about why I dry detangle my hair. And now I'm actually going to introduce today's superhero, which is there is a time and a place to use some moisture when detangling your hair. And I realized when my husband asked me that day, you know, like, well, what would you recommend to someone in your situation? After getting over my initial, like, oh, I don't know what I would say, I realized I would probably recommend an apple cider vinegar detangling spray. So that's what this is. This is just water and apple cider vinegar. I would not recommend using just plain water. The reason why I like water and apple cider vinegar is because apple cider vinegar is a natural detangler, and it helps to offset some of the downsides of having wet hair while you're detangling, which is that when your hair is wet, the cuticle gets raised. The cuticle of the hair is made up of scales, and they get raised when it's wet, which means they're more fragile. They're more likely to get tangled up with each other while they're wet. But the thing about apple cider vinegar is that it's an acidic pH balancer for the hair. So what that means is that when you apply something mildly acidic to the hair strand, it actually helps to close that cuticle and make it smoother, make it less likely to rub against other hair strands and get tangled up. So the presence of vinegar in this spray helps to offset some of the downsides of moisture in detangling of hair. And so you'll see I've already gotten my hair pretty detangled first before using this. And that is the key, because if you just apply moisture of any kind to hair that has a bunch of tangles in it, even if that moisture is in the form of a detangling spray, it's going to like make those tangles worse, because like I said, when hair gets wet, the cuticle gets raised, it kind of like locks together that much more. So ideally you want to use some kind of oil and use your fingers to get as many of the tangles out first before you go in with something like this. And on that note, I am just going to make double sure that I have all the big knots out that I can get out with my fingers alone, or with dry hair, I should say. There is a knot that likes to happen right here at the bottom. The longer my hair gets, the more I do feel a connection between my emotions and my hair. And so just like the simple act of detangling my hair like this it feels so therapeutic. and like loving to myself. And the act of getting the tangles out of my hair can often sort of feel like I'm getting the tangles out of my psyche, my emotions. I know that probably sounds very like, I don't know, philosophical, but that's how I feel about hair. That's one of the reasons why I love having long hair, is just that it feels like an extension of me. And actually, if you look at cultures in parts of history or different parts of the world where they do value having long hair, it is often because they view hair as an extension of yourself, or an extension of your nervous system, or something that connects you with the earth or with your ancestors. And I just find that really fascinating. I don't know, I find that fascinating, those beliefs about hair, because I can sort of feel some of that with my own experience of having long hair. Anyways, okay, so pretty much gotten the biggest tangles out. Go in with my spray. Just get it lightly damp, not a lot. Like, I'm not drenching my hair. I'm more just spraying this in order to get the vinegar in the picture, so to speak. Okay, so while I'm doing this, let's give you a quick update on postpartum hair situation, because I did talk to you guys about this in my hair loss video, because when I recorded that video, I was not yet at a point where postpartum hair loss usually happens. That was only like maybe 2 months postpartum or so. And I am now about 4 months postpartum. So I don't want to speak too soon, but I am not experiencing serious postpartum hair loss yet at all. I will say that during my pregnancies, I tend to like virtually lose no hair at all, like not even a single strand. Like maybe during a whole detangling process, I'll lose like 5 hair strands. That's pretty crazy. So yes, there is this, I am losing a little more hair than I would during pregnancy, simply because I basically lose no hair while I'm pregnant. But it's not at a point that seems serious. It still seems very normal. You know, maybe having like 10 to 15 hair strands come out in a detangling session. So far that's pretty good. Now, that being said, I have noticed sort of a like ebb and flow pattern to this, because there have been days where I'm going in and detangling my hair just like this, and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm feeling hair coming out. Is this the beginning of something? But then I usually will use that as a cue to start taking better care of myself. So what this means for me is I will get back into my routine of nightly scalp massages, because let's be real, during this move it's been crazy. Okay, like here's one hair just came out. I maybe had like 3 or 4 or 5, okay, some more just came out. But to be fair, when I'm detangling my hair after like a period of a few days where I haven't really done much detangling, the hairs that are coming out now have probably been shed over a period of time, not just like coming out right now, if you know what I mean. They're just kind of like stuck in my hair, and then I don't see them come out until I actually detangle my hair. But even so, like I'm not experiencing serious hair loss at this point. Don't want to speak too soon. You know, still technically in that time frame where it could happen or it could accelerate more. But anyway, when I've had days where I notice more hair strands coming out, it's usually like coinciding with when I've been feeling super stressed. And so I will take that as a cue to pick back up with my nightly scalp massages with my awesome scalp massage tool, because I haven't been as consistent with that lately just because of busyness and whatnot. And I will also usually take that as a cue to examine my emotions and the stresses that I've been feeling, because actually, total side note, like I said, this is a conversational style video, so I'm just going to kind of be saying what comes to mind. Over the past couple months, I've been looking into something called German New Medicine, and I'm just super fascinated by it. And I'm not going to go super in depth in it because I'm just learning myself, and this video is not about German New Medicine. But basically, German New Medicine was developed by a German doctor called Dr. Hammer, who discovered something he called the 5 biological laws, which he believed and often could demonstrate that certain physical symptoms in the body could be related or even caused by a emotional or psychological or biological or even sexual conflict that had occurred, and then it triggered that symptom to occur. And usually by the time the symptom occurs, it's actually a sign that the original trauma in the brain is healing. So it's sort of hard to explain, but anyway, if this sounds at all interesting to you, I'd recommend you to check out German New Medicine. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, so all that being said, when I notice I'm losing more hair, sometimes I'll take that as a cue to examine the emotions I've been feeling over the past few days. And of course, I've been feeling a lot more stressed than normal lately. And so I will try to sort of just sit with those feelings and let them go. And yeah. And also, I've been using my progesterone, topical progesterone cream, or not cream, like it's more of an oil. And I have an essential oil blend as well that has topical bioidentical progesterone in it. And I will also use that a little bit more when I start noticing a little more hair loss. And so far, so good. I don't want to speak too soon, but so far, so good. That's my little update on postpartum hair loss. And anyway, so I'm just working through these tangles now that the vinegar is on board, and they're coming out a lot better. And yeah, so this is, if your hair is in a state like mine where it's just super tangled, that's what I recommend. First, going in with your fingers and some oil. The type of oil will depend on your hair type and what works for you. And then once you've gotten all the big knots out that you can get out while your hair is dry, then go in with a little bit of an apple cider vinegar spray. Again, it's diluted in water, and that softens up the tangles, and it can help remove any buildup in your hair that could be contributing to the tangles. And I think this is going pretty well. I'm pretty excited actually for my next hair wash, because I think my curls will come out a lot nicer with the combination of the coconut oil, which is moisturizing my hair, and the fact that now I'm able to work out more of these fine tangles with the vinegar. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to say in this video. Like I said, this was more of a chatty video. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you just kind of enjoyed listening to this and maybe it provoked some thoughts for you. I don't know about you guys, but lately I've just been enjoying listening to podcasts of people who just speak very calmly about interesting things. And I just like having it on in the background. It just seems very like soothing to me. So I guess that's what I was trying to create for you with this video. And yeah, don't forget to check out Ritual. Again, there's a 30% off code for you in the description. They have awesome multivitamins, and I hope you learned something about detangling hair. By the way, I recently started a secondary lifestyle channel called Catherine in Real Life. Oh, there's a fly. And it will be linked right there. So if you'd like to check that out, it has a lot more updates about our moving process. I actually just released a video about our move, packing up and traveling. And I'm going to be releasing a video on there soon about us actually seeing our house and property for the first time, because we bought it sight unseen, believe it or not. So if that sounds interesting to you and you just like to learn more about my lifestyle with my 5 children and homeschooling and home birth and breastfeeding, eating, cooking, whatever, then subscribe to that channel because I have lots more interesting stuff coming there. Okay, I'll see you on the next video.